Hong Kong's air pollution can be dangerous, even deadly. On bad days, city health officials urge people to stay indoors, leaving residents like Sam Tang, who has asthma, feeling trapped.
In the last few years in Hong Kong, I have to pick a good day to go outside. My gut feeling is there's more days, the air is more hazy, and I look outside and I prefer to stay indoor, and that's a little bit disappointing.
With a baby on the way, Sam and his wife are worried. The city's dirty air this winter has forced the couple to consider moving away.
Even Beijing is having a better air quality compared to Hong Kong. So why don't we put our child in Beijing or some other parts in the world with better air quality? So there's definitely a huge concern for family, I think.
Environmental authorities put the latest smog alert partly down to little or no wind, which would disperse the air pollutants. But campaigners say officials should be looking beyond the weather.
Government is doing well in correlating the weather factors to the air pollution. But in our point of view, it is always the traffic pollution as a constant factor to our air quality.
The government has taken steps to tackle air pollution over the years, including measures to reduce motor vehicle emissions. And in 2013, the Environment Bureau brought in a clean air plan for Hong Kong. But according to roadside air quality recordings, the number of hours smog posed a high health risk in 2017 was double the year before. And some feel authorities aren't doing enough. Campaigners are suggesting traffic control during bouts of bad air as part of the emergency plan. But with toxic smog also drifting down from mainland China, coughing up a solution to this eye-watering problem won't be easy. Samantha Vardas, TRT World, Hong Kong.
This is where the water was.
Daniel Bouthie has lived here in the Paris suburb of Villeneuve-le-Roi for 35 years. This is the second time he's seen his house flooded, both in the last 18 months.
This time it's come up very slowly, whereas in May 2016 it came up in torrents, really fast, and we didn't have time to move the furniture. At least this time we got it upstairs.
France has had the third wettest December and January on record, meaning the Seine has risen to 5 or 6 times its normal level, and in places has overflown its banks. Here we're just 10 miles from central Paris, and yet there are swans swimming in a residential street behind me. Hundreds of people have had to be evacuated from their homes here for more than 5 days, and it may take as long as 3 weeks for the water to go back down far enough that they can go home. In 2016, 4 people were killed in flooding that cost more than $1.7 billion worth of damage. Now, local authorities say they're better prepared, and they've had more time to get people and their valuables out of the way.
People have either been able to go to a hotel if their insurance covers it, or for those who have nothing, we've taken over a gym, and we've got 100 beds up there.
Central Paris looks set to escape the water levels it saw in 2016, but roads and railway lines have had to close, while the Louvre has shut some galleries to move artworks to higher ground. Much of the city is very near the water level, and meteorologists say that as the climate gets more unpredictable, Paris should prepare for a flood that may force up to 500,000 people to evacuate. Elena Casas, TRT World, Paris.
From handbag throwing and racing in heels to showing off your prowess with a hula hoop or not. Myanmar's Drag Queen Olympics are just one of the highlights of the country's biggest ever LGBT festival, taking place in a public park for the first time. A milestone for the community in a country where same-sex relations are still officially illegal.
Some people don't know about LGBT people. You get people who are LGBT, but they don't know what that is. They don't understand. So that's why it's difficult for other people to understand as well.
Organisers were happily surprised to be granted permission to hold the event in the park in downtown Yangon. Coming out in public means that numbers have exploded, with some 6,000 people turning up on the first day alone.
So I would say this is not just for LGBT community, this is for the whole country, and like acknowledging the equality and basic human rights.
LGBT-focused documentaries are also being screened throughout the two-weekend event. The film This Kind of Love charts activist Aung Myo Min's life from student protester in 1988 to the years he spent in the jungle as an armed rebel against military rule. He hopes he can help break down stereotypes.
People were really, surprised to see that, gay men like me on the stage giving a political speech, and I went to the jungle, which is totally, dominated by macho men and lots, very restrictive military rules. So I survived.
As tolerance increases, activists now hope the next step will be getting rid of the law criminalising the community. The festival will take to the road later this year to proudly spread the word and the partying across the country.
Many people believe Pakistanis or Iranians aren't refugees, and so they cannot know what's happening in the border province of Balochistan, where these people come from. They spoke out against tribal leaders there who want independence, and they were threatened with death, so they ran for it. They crossed the Evros River from Turkey into Greece, walked for 5 days, and ended up sleeping here in Thessaloniki for months. The men had to take it in turns to stay awake to protect their wife and sister.
I felt like committing suicide. I was going mad. I thought I should have stayed in my country and let the tribes people kill me. I just wasn't expecting this at all.
Nabil got frostbite in thick snow on the river border. He can no longer bend his fingers.
I can't even go to the toilet by myself. My brother has to help me. There's no way I can work. It's really stressful.
When they took us to where they'd been sleeping, we realised we'd been here before, in November 2016. Then it was different people, all suffering the same things. That winter turned out to be the coldest for decades. Water froze in the refugee camps, and Greece's lack of preparation was exposed. A full year on, nothing has changed.
It's due to the fact that their fundamental rights are being violated. Those people don't have a house, don't have access to medical care, to accommodation, absolutely nothing.
The Balok family got shelter 3 months ago through the Norwegian Refugee Council. Saima is now pregnant, but they're only guaranteed accommodation for 3 months more, so they could end up back here again before she gives birth.
Here you are, enjoy.
While the Greek authorities and charities try to prioritise families, single men have no chance. 1 meal a day provided by young European volunteers working off donations, and that's it. There's no doubt the big increase in people crossing the Evros River into northern Greece has simply compounded the homeless problem here, and Thessaloniki, we're told, is now completely full. There is simply nowhere to put all these people. The only bit of good news is that the winter so far hasn't been anything like as cold as the terrible conditions this time last year. But if it does get worse, Greece could have a full-blown crisis on its hands. They showed us where they sleep, underneath an abandoned, half-built concrete block. If the police catch them here, they can go to jail, so they dare not even light a fire.
This is our room.
Presumably when they sleep, they dream of nothing, because that is exactly what they have.
So cold, we have problem.
Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, Thessaloniki.
Recent attacks in the Idlib countryside have driven thousands of people from their homes since the beginning of the year. They're often forced to take shelter in makeshift camps. Abu Muhammad and his 8 children live in this tent.
This camp is absolutely horrible. It lacks tents, blankets, rugs. Look at our conditions. I have 8 children. They need heat. Sometimes I find material to make a fire in the morning. Sometimes I don't. These are miserable conditions.
In camps like these, getting children to school is no longer a priority. Winter is harsh here, And keeping children warm and dry is the battle parents are constantly fighting.
After we escaped death and bombardments, we arrived here. It's terribly cold. It's a harsh winter. People gave us blankets, and we took them to a tailor who tailored them for our children.
Mustafa is the seamstress who is helping these people keep the cold at bay.
My job is making clothes. Now I'm helping the newly displaced people. They are cold. They bring me blankets and I sew them into blouses, jackets for children and coats for women.
Clothes made out of unused blankets may keep refugees warm, but they offer no protection from the bomb falling from above. The de-escalation zones were supposed to stop the warplanes from flying here, but they have failed, and civilians are once again left to keep one eye on the sky. Ahmed El-Burai, TRT World, Idlib, Northern Syria.
قبل الحرب يعني أمر طبيعي عادي الواحد ببلده حتى إذا تولد الوحدة مرتاحة مبسوطة هون ما في إنه الوحدة لا هي مرتاحة ولا هي مبسوطة.
بيجوا لهون مثلا كل مرة أنا بشوف وزن لازم مينيموم الحامل 12 كيلو زيادة وزن مرات 5 كيلو منيح إذا 5 كيلو زيادة الحامل شفتوا كيف وبتولدوا أولاد الترم مزبوط بيخلص 9 أشهر بس أولاد صغار.
كل مرة بولدها بصير أصحاب أنا وياها.
نحن كنا بسوريا يعني الولد لقاحاته أولادي كلهم يعني بانتظام على الموعد وكان معيشتهم يعني كانت كتير كويسة وتعليمهم يعني إنه إن شاء الله بلكي هيك نقدر نأمن لها هالشيء.
Militants have attacked Marshal Fahim Military Academy in western Kabul, killing at least 11 Afghan soldiers and injuring 16 others. A Defence Ministry spokesman said that 4 of the 5 insurgents were killed. None of them had made it past the first gate. So-called Islamic State has claimed responsibility. This latest incident is part of a significant increase in violence in the Afghan capital. It comes just 2 days after an ambulance packed with explosives killed more than 100 people. The Taliban claimed responsibility for that attack, as well as an earlier assault on a luxury hotel.
The battle for Bursaya Mountain intensified on Sunday. The constant roar of jets and artillery targeting this important high point along the Turkish border. Explosions echoed over the border town of Kilis, drawing a crowd. A strange fascination watching the war unfold, but for some it's a little too close to home.
Even though we are here in Kilis, we've become used to this war. It has happened before.
when ISIL was on the other side of the border. But I've still moved my wife and kids to another area for safety, but I'm staying.
Turkey's offensive against the YPG, the Kurdish group it considers a terrorist organization, is very visible here. It has also stirred nationalist fervor.
This crowd has just shown up at the border crossing, holding orange branches in their hands. This is, of course, the official name of the operation against the YPG. These are nationalists. They are very much behind their president and in support of this operation.
Allahu Akbar.
And this is what that operation looks like inside Syria. Turkey is backing Free Syrian Army fighters, and at the moment the main focus is pushing the YPG back from the border areas. The Kurdish fighters say Turkey's offensive has caused civilian casualties. Turkey says it only targets YPG positions. But as is often the case in war, facts can be hard to come by. Turkey's leaders stress that this is only the beginning, and they intend to clear the YPG from its entire border area all the way to Iraq. But the YPG in that area further east is supported by the United States, and there are American bases and military personnel on the ground there. Relations between Ankara and Washington are already tense, and just another example of how complicated Syria's war has become. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera Kilis on the Turkish-Syrian border.
A Chinese warplane entered South Korea's Air Defense Identification Zone, or KADIZ, this morning. According to Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the plane appeared from the southwest of Yeodo Island at 9:30 a.m. local time. It then entered Japan's Air Defense Identification Zone before 10 a.m. and returned home just after 2 p.m. South Korea dispatched aircraft for surveillance immediately after the plane was detected. Beijing's military planes have entered the area multiple times since the country unilaterally declared its own such zone in 2013, which overlaps with parts of Korea and Japan's areas. In mid-December, 5 Chinese warplanes flew into the KADIZ for what it claims was an ordinary drill.
Now, North Korea has called for breakthrough efforts to be made in what the country's leader has called a reunification with the South. It comes as an inter-Korea Olympic team prepares to compete at the upcoming Winter Games in Pyeongchang. It marks a rare moment of eased tensions on the peninsula after a war of words between North Korea and the US. Igor Zhdanov takes a closer look at that.
Kim Jong-un, a man who couldn't think of anything better than to include a threat of a nuclear winter in his New Year's speech. And Donald Trump, a man who couldn't think of anything better than to up the ante. What ensued might one day come to be known as the Battle of Buttons.
The entire US mainland is within the range of our nuclear strike, and the button is always on the table in my office. They should clearly know that this is certainly not a threat, but rather a reality.
Please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works.
So everyone's beginning to get used to the two-way barrage of insults. But then, unexpectedly, Kim starts cracking out lines from a very different playbook, proposing a joint women's hockey team with South Korea at the Winter Olympics. For the first time in history, who would have thought? Then, on top of that, the North Korean leader invites the southern team to train at his luxury ski resort, which is also rumored to be his vantage point for observing missile tests. And those have reportedly been put on hold. The notorious red button is away in the drawer. And finally, the despot holds out an olive branch, once again calling for the reunification of the peninsula.
We will courageously smash all of the challenges of the nation's desire for reunification. Let all the Koreans rise up in the peacekeeping struggle against war to baffle the reckless nuclear war moves of the US.
So what about his adversary half the world away? Has Trump now started trying to outflatter his arch-nemesis? Well, actually, it seems the switch from war to love caught the American leader off guard, although he did claim that Kim's change of heart was of his making. Well, twice, actually.
Sanctions and other pressures are beginning to have a big impact on North Korea. Rocket Man now wants to talk to South Korea for the first time. Does anybody really believe that talks and dialogue would be going on between North and South Korea right now if I wasn't firm, strong and willing to commit our total might against the North?
And since then, for almost a month now, nothing on the Rocket Man from Trump.
I think this is his way of trying to say, see, my policy of pressure
is having an effect, but in reality, it's the policy of pressure had only made this more difficult to come into play and had delayed it. It would have happened much sooner, I think, without Trump in the picture. And unfortunately, I think this is only a temporary warming from the United States side because due to the specific case of it being the Olympics, a sort of a special case. The United States has announced it's going to conduct the usual war exercises immediately after the Olympics.
But after all, Trump has always maintained he can be flexible, meaning that he can go from foe to friend with his North Korean counterpart just like that. So why the silence now? Well, perhaps Trump's brainstorming a friendlier nickname. Igor Zhdanov.
And at an international security forum, the nation's defense chief used some strong words to warn Pyongyang against using nukes to attack Seoul or Washington. According to our Oh Jung-hee, he also reassured in dealing with the regime's threats, South Korea's non-proliferation stance remains unchanged.
North Korea will be wiped off the world map should it use nuclear weapons on South Korea or the United States. That's what South Korea's Defense Minister Song Young-moo confidently stated on Monday at a security forum in Singapore. When asked whether Pyongyang has a coercive purpose to its nuclear weapons program, Minister Song said the North attacking South Korea or the U.S. won't happen for real, and that the nuclear development program is just a part of the Kim Jong-un regime's propaganda strategy. He stressed that it's, quote, anachronistic to say Pyongyang will use its nuclear weapons, but added, if it does, then the regime will be erased off the world map. And to deal with this threat, Minister Song gave assurances that South Korea won't be deploying tactical nuclear weapons, but developing stronger conventional weapons to keep peace, not go to war. The remarks came during a question and answer session after Minister Song's keynote speech at the 2018 Fullerton Forum, the very first as Seoul's defense chief. During his address, he stressed the most urgent and grave security threat in the Asia-Pacific region is Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development, and said South Korea will not under any circumstances accept North Korea as a nuclear state. He emphasized that Seoul will work towards a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula through peaceful measures like dialogue and negotiations, saying sanctions and pressure will only be used as means of achieving this. Mentioning that North Korea could have been secretly trading with other nations using foreign vessels, Minister Song urged all nations in the region to abide by UN sanctions and up the pressure on the regime. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
You know, I've long believed that a society can be judged by how it deals with its most vulnerable, the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn. Your compassion, your perseverance has made a difference for the most vulnerable in our society. And because of all of you, I truly believe the day will come, because of your efforts and prayers, with pro-life majorities in our Congress, with President Donald Trump in the White House. I know America will choose life once again. Thank you all very much.